The acceptance of objectification produces guilt from the contradiction of one's education and socialization to suppress their base desires, where they deny subjective significance, e.g. toilet training. The body's reaction to guilt, constant focus on self-improvement as product of the acceptance of objectification, prevents one from recognizing the underlying cause. The guilt generated by the acceptance of objectification prevents social interaction, in which the lack of experience of subjective significance of others in turn supports one's acceptance of objectification, thereby providing positive feedback. Despite the guilt produced by the acceptance of objectification, social tolerance of objectification and the product constant experience of objectification may be used by the subconscious to justify one's acceptance of objectification, thereby providing positive feedback. The guilt generated by one's acceptance of objectification makes one feel unworthy of being honoured by the persons of the objectified sex, accepting one's own subjugation to experience of their apparent self-objectification as punishment or penance for one's dishonourable thoughts or actions against their sex. Provides sense of personal glory, of moral accomplishment. Provides those who experience the objectified an opportunity to confront their base desires, thereby enhancing their character. One's apparent self-objectification encourages or creates an environment of trust in another, where this trust in the other may be appreciated by the other, may therefore be used to increase or confirm the other's subjective significance. Makes one feel uncomfortable and laugh at the ignorance of the objectified of one's own desires. It is damaging to those who view the objectified. It takes all of one's effort to revert one's attention, which would otherwise be used doing something productive. In an objectification-tolerant society, people get their spiritual exercise just dealing with the falsehood of objectification around them, and so they are likely not to become involved in or respect explicit spirituality, religion. Apparent self-objectification forces one to look the other way when in the vicinity of a non-introduced person in order to show them respect and honour, and to avoid accepting their apparent or illusion of objectification. Apparent self-objectification provides opportunities to honour the objectified explicitly. The tolerance of objectification provides a constant battle with lives, and it's all for nothing if you don't have freedom. It makes us feel justified in acting in our own interests. Tolerance of objectification and the influence, power this has on others justifies one's own involvement in, submission to, objectification. Apparent self-objectification may encourage violent, tolerant attitudes. Physical violence may result from the objectification of someone who turns out not to be an object. Tolerance of objectification makes one feel okay about having successive relationships, feel okay about entering a new relationship, okay about entering a new relationship without having always been loyal to them, or even okay about not being loyal to one's current partner. It encourages graffiti and other disorderly activity, punk, in reaction to disrespect tolerated by their society. Instead of being reliant upon the grace and goodwill of others, people become self-reliant, requiring constant audio stimulus, swearing to God, exercise, risk-taking, social contact, and drugs, including alcohol. It increases the attractiveness of alcohol, which provides temporary relief from pain or discomfort, but also makes it easier to focus on the happiness generated by the subjective nature of reality. It increases the attractiveness of alcohol, which makes us feel bad upon during the sober up process. It makes us focus on the subjective nature of ourselves, and therefore makes the subjective nature of others, including the objectified, more obvious, making objectification easier to dismiss. Increases the attraction of high-risk or adrenaline-dependent activities, which rely upon mind, subject, over body, object. Apparent self-objectification encourages the consumption of alcohol. Alcohol can make one happy in any circumstance, because no one can be disrespecting them in their alcoholic state. In fact, they may well be disrespecting others. They couldn't win a particular person of the opposite sex if they tried, meaning apparent self-objectification has little negative effect in this state. Tolerance of one form of objectification may be used to justify another form of objectification. It triggers defense mechanisms. It lowers one's internal agreement with their current state of being, reducing one's ability to sleep, and therefore the perception of the importance of sleep for others. The emulation of apparent self-objectification in media presentations does not produce the same collection of effects as does a direct experience of apparent self-objectification. In a media presentation, the probability of the subject apparently objectifying themselves, actually objectifying themselves, and thereby denying the viewer's subjective significance, and therefore felt subconsciously to be uncaring or inattentive, is lower. The emulation of apparent self-objectification in media presentations does not produce the same collection of effects as does a direct experience of apparent self-objectification, as the apparent object in media presentations doesn't go away, or can be called upon to come back. The emulation of apparent self-objectification in the media does not produce the same collection of effects, as the objectified is not actually there, so one cannot actually be disrespected by anyone. The emulation of apparent self-objectification in media does not produce the same collection of effects, as there cannot be anyone around to witness one being disrespected by the objectified. It may encourage people to have sex before marriage, or before they are willing or able to bear, provide for, or educate children. Increases the total number of sexual experiences by a human, thereby theoretically increasing the total pleasure provided by their sexual experiences over the course of their lifetime. Reduces the pleasure of any given sexual experience, noting that pleasure and pain sensation are in some ways relative to the encouragement and discouragement of behaviour, which in some ways is dependent upon the availability and inevitability of the experience. Tolerance of objectification may arise as there exists a discrepancy between the way each sex experiences arousal and therefore the process of objectification. Visual and audio stimulus in particular triggers a male's desire to pursue and fight for a fertile female. Whereas the demonstration of dominance, including touch in particular, triggers a female's desire to mate with a successful male. One is therefore unable to understand the impact of objectification-based media on the opposite sex by their own experience of the media, lest they mentally relate these events to the dominant patterns of arousal experienced by the opposite sex. One sex may therefore be more inclined to tolerate a form of objectification, or just oppose it in principle, e.g. media-based objectification or apparent self-objectification, while deeply opposing another, e.g. sexual harassment. The opposite sex may, however, be more inclined to tolerate the other, or just oppose it in principle, e.g. sexual harassment, while deeply opposing the original form, media-based objectification, or apparent self-objectification. Males are naturally more inclined to objectification in general, including both visual and implied, as they have the capacity to mate with and are naturally inclined to mate with as many attractive females as possible, whereas a female is less influenced by the objectification in general, as their choice of partner naturally limits their sexual reproductive capacity with other partners.